Hello, all, and welcome. My name is Alicia Reiner, and I am here with my partners in Lavari, Tabitha St. Bernard Jacobs and Claudine DeSola. And we are so excited that you're joining us here in this Sustainathon, and that's a word that we made up. And what it really means is we want to hack the system of sustainability and responsibility in this moment. And we need your help to do that and this incredible group of panelists. For those of you who don't know, Lavari was started sort of shortly after the 2016 election. Claudine brought us all together, and really she brought us together to look at how we break all of the systems of fashion that we found kind of disgusting. And we really just started with a coffee talking about it, and then ended up deciding, we want to make things too. So Lavari's purpose is to create a sustainable, zero waste, ethical fashion, what's become not just a company that makes things, but also a community. And that's really part of what we're doing here today. So the Sustainathon will explore the possibilities of what the future of responsibility looks like. How do we create an industry that prioritizes responsibility at every level, from manufacturing and production to workers' rights and office culture and marketing? We're going to explore the connection between a brand that strives to be anti-racist and the responsibility to their workers, who are often women and many times women of color. And as this country commemorates Juneteenth this weekend, and there's this widening public consciousness celebrating Blackness, and this is the moment where, like, I wish we were in a live audience so we could all like whoop and cheer at that celebration of Blackness. We're looking at how brands have been adjusting to what we're pushing for as the new normal. What does it truly mean in business, and how can we strive to be on a continuous journey of growth and intentionality? We've seen an influx of brands becoming more socially conscious in the last weeks, while others, specifically Black-owned businesses, have been pushing this into the mainstream for years. So how do we respond to this in a way that creates long-lasting change, and how do we view responsibility in design? I'm going to turn it over to Claudine now.
I just wanted to thank Style 360, founded by David Manning, along with the team of High Def, for hosting this important conversation on Style 360 NYFW. Their website is currently hosting some virtual events such as this, and we appreciate for this event to be included on their platform. Style 360 hosts live events and fashion shows during Fashion Week, and Lavari was lucky enough to be part of our first fashion show being at Style 360. So we just want to thank again David, Jackie, and the team of High Def for hosting this again today.
Thank you, Claudine. Yes, Jackie has been very patient with us all. As you know, as Alicia said, I just want to acknowledge that we're in the midst of a very important and necessary movement in support of Black lives and also Black freedom. We're grateful to use this panel as a sort of an additional opportunity to shed light on this in the context of a larger conversation around responsibility in design. So just wanted to note a few things. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted, and is actually also being streamed live on Facebook, on Style 360's Facebook page. We want to hear from you all. We want to get to know you a little bit more. Tell us your name, where you're calling in from, and why you want to be a part of this conversation. There's also a Q&A box. If you look at the bottom of your screen, and yes, it's right there. On the right side of your Zoom screen, you'll see there's a Q&A box. Feel free to drop any questions that you want to ask the panelists. And then at the end of this, there's going to be a Q&A session, and we will try to answer as many of them as we possibly can. and I'll pass it back over to Alicia to introduce our panel.
Okay, we have the most incredible panel, so I'm gonna have to go a little shorter than their bios because their bios are so long and incredible that it would take the entire panel. But I will start with Dominique Dradford. Dominique Dradford is currently a leader in environmental education, ethics, and community advocacy. She's the chief curator of the blog Melon and Sustainable Style. She's also the co-founder of Sustainable Brooklyn, an organization working to bridge the gap between sustainability and targeted communities. She is a pillar of visibility specifically for how the Black diaspora absorbs information, gains clarity, and becomes more sustainably liberated while simultaneously working to dismantle toxic systems. Yes. Celine DiCarlo is the Vice President of Brand, People, and Culture at Mara Hoffman, and joined after 10 years with CNN International as a global senior executive overseeing the Africa portfolio. I didn't know that. Celine is concentrated on organizing improvement and leading partnerships focused on social engagement and community organizations while building out company sustainability framework and co-founding the New York Fashion Workplace Development Coalition and the Women in Sustainability Business Coalition. And I get the pleasure of working with her in reference to the Women's Prison Association and helping to create more jobs for women coming out of prison in the fashion areas. Elizabeth Potts is the founder of Fine Antique and Jewelry online retailer, which called The Moonstone. And what I love that they do is they repurpose, recycle, and reuse incredible items with story and history to create new pieces. Ngozi Okaro founded Custom Collaborative to support immigrant and low-income women launching sustainable fashion careers. Custom Collaborative serves U.S. designers who want to design and produce local fashion industry workers and consumers who want ethical fashion. Yes. She's won a lot of awards, so I'm just going to name a few. The World Changing Women in Consciousness business winner, the Changemaker of the Year Award, the Spirit of Entrepreneurship Award, and Custom Collaborative's community of artisans are currently producing face masks for donation and sale. Each purchase provides vital income to the women in our programs who rely on fashion production work to sustain them and their families. So please visit their shop to learn more, and we'll put that in the chat. As well as like everyone's full bio, we can put in the chat, and we can also put their Instagram handles in the chat. Sarah Pajiu is CEO and co-founder of Blue Land, which reimagines cleaning products to eliminate single-use plastic packaging. When I found out about this, I got really excited. Blue Land's products are sold as reusable systems with refillable bottles and cleaning tablets, which can be added to water to make cleaning solutions and hand soaps, all of which are environmentally friendly. Sarah has been a serial entrepreneur for over 10 years and launched consumer businesses like Jemmy and Rockets of Awesome. And last but not least is our token white male, Ken Cook, who I really wouldn't include in this panel if he weren't so amazing and cool. He's the president and co-founder of Environmental Working Group and recognized as a leader and influential critic of industrial agriculture, U.S. food and farm policy, and the nation's broken approach to approaching families and children from toxic substances. Under his leadership over the past 25 years, EWG has pioneered the use of digital technologies to expose the harms done by misconceived crop subsidies, crop insurance, and runaway agriculture. The organization has also empowered American families with easy-to-use, data-driven tools to help reduce their exposure to potential harmful ingredients in food, drinking water, cosmetics, and other household products. So that is our esteemed and amazing panel. And I really want to start by asking the panel in general, all of you, anybody, what is giving you hope in this moment? What is making you excited in this moment? And what are you really thrilled about in your industry, like the potential or ways things have turned upside down? In this moment, I personally am deeply excited by how we are turning it all upside down. So I want to hear from all of you what's exciting you and giving you hope in reference to that. Anybody can start.
I'll jump in. Because I think what I was going to say is probably something that I'm sure a lot of people are feeling, but I do think that this is period in one where people have just become more mindful than ever about the kind of world they want to live in the future they want to build, because everything's just kind of turned upside down. Initially with the starting of COVID, and now with all the incredible momentum behind Black Lives Matters, also just shows how powerful and quickly we can mobilize individual action, and how we can really make an impact. And I think, that has been, personally so energizing. And I think there are so many other, areas of our lives that we, that I'm hoping that this will be extended to, certainly also, the critical movements to combat climate change and plastic pollution as well. So as much as this has been also a tough and emotional time, I think it's also been a time of a lot of hope and education and learning and listening all around. In terms of, what you mentioned in terms of hacks that we've found during this period, because, our businesses have been all about environmental and sustainability hacks. That's really, has been our primary focus to date, our mission of eliminating single-use plastic. But I think this period, again, has been re-energizing for me and in so many other ways, as part of Blueland's commitments to make more long-standing commitments to support Black Lives Matter, beyond just donations and signing petitions. One commitment we made, I guess, 2.5 weeks ago was to proactively spend with Black-owned businesses in our supply chain. And I remember initially, being very scared about that commitment because, our business, we make bottles and we make cleaning tablets, right? We don't actually spend with a ton of suppliers. It wasn't clear to us how we were going to actually then make that happen. It wasn't obvious how we do this, but we stepped back and thought nothing that we've ever done as Blueland has ever been obvious how we do it. We've shrunk down these liquid cleaning sprays to these refill tablets, and even that 3 years ago when we started the journey, it seemed like an impossibility. Can't be done. How do we do this? And so we decided to make that commitment, and I think it's been exciting to see just in a couple of weeks how enthusiastic our small team has been behind those commitments and how many ways we've already identified to be able to do that. So
I love hearing that. I think mostly because for me, that's what this moment is about, is leap and then net will appear, make the commitment and then figure it out. You don't have to wait I don't know if I can, but no, I make that commitment.
Yep.
And then that's my responsibility. That's the definition of responsibility. I make that commitment and then I figure out,
You put in the hard work and time to do it.
Yeah,
for sure.
So it's interesting that, you say that the world is turned upside down because suddenly, but for me and much of my community, the world has always been upside down.
Mm-hmm.
Ayanna Johnson has recently done a study, Dr. Ayanna Johnson, about how much more Black and Brown communities are invested in environmentalism and sustainability But if you look at the legacy environmental organizations, Black people are not in them practically at all, and especially not at the decision-making levels. Black people, brown people have always been, recycling, thinking about how can we make the most out of everything. And so now other people are coming around to it. So that's very important. It's heartening to see. I mean, just thinking about upside downness, and while we're in the context of Juneteenth, to me, it's upside down that Black people built this country, right, under conditions of torture and for free, and then are the most marginalized. That, Memorial Day, the last holiday we celebrated before Juneteenth, was really created by Black people, and it was called Decoration Day. And it was, formerly enslaved people who felt that the bodies of like these Union soldiers who had been buried in mass graves deserved a real ceremony. And so that there's so much that we don't know, that it seems upside down in some context. But if we really look at the whole of it, like really it's upside down that Juneteenth has just become well known this week. So, that said, we are working through the new circumstances. Basically, we're always resilient. We turned our organization into a mask making company, and we did that all remotely. So we're being nimble. We're so excited that people are figuring out that how important it is to care about the environment and to really do something about it. So we feel like this is an inflection point in both race relations, environment, and really the economy. And all of those three things are tied in together.
Yeah, to piggyback off of what Sarah and Ngozi said so well, for me, I find that this point in time is a real hopeful one of reflection and a time to pause, to really wake the hell up in all of these different avenues, and for myself and for people in my community to pause and unlearn and relearn in a multitude of ways. And, with the Moonstone, we sell, antique and vintage items, repurposed items, but they're really tokens of a life past, a life well lived, a life of meaning. And so it for me and my platform has been a really great way to open up these conversations that maybe otherwise you wouldn't. And we have all this time at home and all of these resources. There's never been a time to isolate where we've had this opportunity to really do our work and to really research and to push through conversations that otherwise maybe we would glance over or think like, I'm too busy, or, work is too crazy, or, I have to run here, I have to run there. If everyone could take the time to learn how to make sourdough bread, the least we can do is spend this time to have these conversations about sustainability, about Black lives, and to really move forward, because there's no going back.
I would also add the importance of collaboration and partnerships right now. So I think what's making me hopeful is the idea of accountability and action, and the intolerance for any kind of white paralysis at the moment. That definitely gives me hope, especially as a company, as a country, as a world, and that forward moving momentum of understanding that inaction is, being an accomplice to a system of oppression from which individuals have really been able to succeed from at the expense of violence towards Black and brown communities. And that definitely makes me hopeful, especially when it comes to the apparel industry, which I know we'll get into later, but that's definitely a symbol of hope.
Am I on mute? Oh no, I'm not on mute. For me, I think just as a Black woman in this country and being in the sustainability space, hope has always been a tool for my community, for us to be resilient. Like, it's always been a tool that we've used to, if we fall, we get back up. Dealing with daily internalized and infrastructural barriers, we keep pushing. But I think one thing that I'm excited about is I'm seeing resiliency transform into regenerative thought and practice. So it's no longer us being pushed and getting back up. And I'm saying us as in my particular community. We're on the ground getting back up and then using that as fuel for circular thinking and practices. And I'm seeing so many people in my community just go so deep into regenerative thought and restorative thought, creating new models for healing, new business ecosystems, and just radical frameworks for resistance and economic well-being. And just me personally taking up space as a change agent, as an independent, but also as the co-founder of Sustainable Brooklyn. I'm seeing myself, my partner and I, and our community hyper connect. And I'm just excited to continue to push the envelope of circularity within our own community.
Ken, did you want to add anything before we move on? Or
I do. To me, we were for months frozen in an environmental crisis, which is essentially what the coronavirus is, for which there were only environmental solutions, and still are. And they're contested and they've become politicized, but fundamentally it's the only thing we have lacking vaccines or treatments is social distancing and hand washing and masks and all the other things that really are measures that we control because we, or not, because they're environmental in nature. And then there was this, because people were available to do it and motivated to do it, there was this incredible surge to the streets to protest the environmental public health crisis, the poison of racism that we are understanding now, I think, more and more deeply, particularly white Americans who are opening up to things we should have understood long ago and paid attention to long ago and experienced long ago. These two things coming together are incredibly important for our future. And I'll just say that to touch on what a number of you said, what's exciting to me is that there don't seem to be right now any boundaries on where we will express the power of this movement's potential. It's not limited to policy. It's not limited to economics. It's not limited to culture or policymaking. There's the potential for us to take action in all those realms and an appetite to do it, and driven from from the people up. So it just feels like in a time where, think back 4 months ago, how hopeful were we compared to now? That it's the hope born of the recognition that we have these gigantic challenges that we've let go too long.
thank you, everyone. So Ken, you actually just answered the question that I had for you. So I'm going to ask Dominique, what does true equity mean for you in relation to your work? You and I have done some things in the past before, and you have been one of those people sort of at the forefront of centering Black voices since the beginning of your work in the sustainable fashion space. So if you can talk a little bit about what true equity means with the work that you're doing.
It's a good question. I think about this often and my answer usually shifts, but equity is built into systems. So I think mitigating the exploitation of Black and brown bodies within the various layers of the supply chain is a fundamental tenet of equity. It's like we can no longer me as a Black person and my Black and brown brothers and sisters, we can no longer be in sacrifice zones of white power, white wealth, white resource domination. And that's what's killing us as well as the planet. And when I think about this question, I see it sort of in two spheres. I was listening to a live with this young Black woman by the name of Ashton Berry, and she gave two very simple definitions of accountability and responsibility. And this goes back into sort of what an equity-based consciousness needs to entail. She said accountability was the mental process and responsibility was the action, right? So when we're looking at systems, accountability comes first. You have to build a foundation of internal work. You have to go through this really rigorous journey of colonial systems mapping. You have to do comprehensive studies on complex systems. You have to scrutinize the supply chain from a colonial vantage point, and that involves reading and listening and having hella uncomfortable conversations. And I think potentially what's been happening in many spaces is that we're moving without that internal accountability component because of guilt and fragility. And that's why in my work, I'm so passionate about redefining sustainability, because circularity and transparent and sort of corporate social responsibility has been highlighted. But honestly, circularity, in my opinion, has been linear as fuck in the sustainability space because we haven't been addressing neocolonialism and real social justice and sort of Black liberation and environmental liberation from a global point of view. So accountability is always going to be the first part of equity. And then the second part is going to be action. So once you go through the movements, the internal movements, the internal ecosystem movements of accountability, you realize that now you're able to really address the limitations within legislation and policy. Now you're able to have authentic audits and assessments in your company and then do maintenance work on a continuous basis. Now you can actually put principles and practices into place so that it's not just the propaganda of diversity and inclusion, but actual agency and stakeholdership for Black and brown bodies. And this trickles down to my work, because now that the systems give a shit, we can have integrated circular, economies on a small scale level. And we can have wealth distribution, and we can have land rights, and we can have just revival in our community and restoration in our community. And yeah, I mean, I'll stop there because I can go on and on, but I think those are the important parts, at least from a systemic infrastructural point of view, how we start to think about equity and realizing that every single white person is a stakeholder in the mainstream ideology of sustainability, which means every white person who has privilege needs to go through that process of accountability and responsibility before we can so that we can think of equity the way it needs to be done or thought and done.
Thank you for that. And I think that's the only way that we can ensure that this movement results in systemic change. If we start with accountability and then we move into action, because I see a lot of, we've spoken about like the Black Square on social media. We're in a moment where a lot of companies and brands are thinking about, what can I do in this moment? Do I need to give a donation? Do I need to put up a Black Square? Do I need to find Black voices to share my platform with? But the way to really ensure that past this period in time where we're talking about this and there's increased sort of awareness in the public consciousness, the way to make sure that there is systemic change is to go through that process that you're talking about, where you start with accountability and you make sure that there's long-lasting action that it ends, that sort of carries that forward. So
I want to add like one tiny piece of that, which is, as Lavari, multiple times we've had an idea of something we wanted to do, And we had to stop at a certain point because we realized we couldn't do it. Like, we wanted to partner with someone, and in doing a deep dive with the system we wanted to partner with, it didn't meet the level of ethics and responsibility and truth of who we want to be in the world. And I think I just want to say, to me, it's so much more important to pause and not do something than to do something that is not ethical and not responsible and not equitable. Like, I feel like the planet is in this pause, and we can mirror that moment. And it's so important for businesses to mirror that we actually pause before, like, instead of jumping to do the thing, to be part of the, like, pause and really give it the deep thought that you just expressed, Dominique, of like, that type of deep thinking can really incite authentic change.
That's so true. So we started off this conversation talking a little bit about responsibility in design and with our businesses, talking about things like workers' rights and manufacturing and marketing. So kind of looking at it in a very sort of holistic way, including anti-racism. And I want to ask of Sarah and also Elizabeth, what do you think other brands and companies you work with can be doing to be a part of the change that's needed? So just thinking about the brands and companies that you work with already, what do you wish that they could be doing differently?
For me, so much of selling vintage and antique jewelry is the story and the history, right? And I was partaking in this class yesterday about anti-racism, and she made a really good point that struck with me is, we only know or we're taught a certain kind of history. And so we, grow up with that view that that's the way the world is, and it's not true. And so in my community, I really hope to see a lot more people using a wider scope of history when we're telling these stories, when we're relating to items and pieces, when we're gifting something that means something to us to someone else. I hope that we can start to really break down everything that we've learned and relearn it in the correct and appropriate way.
I think for us, it's really been, how do our suppliers take as discerning of an eye, and sort of continue to keep the highest standards that, many of us that as consumer facing brands have, highest standards, whether it be ingredients and processes as it relates to environment sustainability or non-toxicity of their products, or to having sort of diverse teams in management. It's been interesting as we've had these conversations with the suppliers in the past few weeks, where, we'll ask the questions whether, again, about diversity of their teams, or substantiation for some of the eco claims that they are making. And like, we've met with folks that like straight up like laugh in our face, being like, no one's ever asked us these types of questions, right? Like, suppliers that are saying that they're palm oil free, right? Or their products are compostable. And we're like, we want to see the certification, but they're kind of like, why? No one ever asked to see that. And so it's interesting because I think that, many of us as brands, as consumer facing brands, we love that we have consumers that are educated and care and are discerning and keep us honest, whether on the eco side or, as we've seen, more recently, so many brands are taking a stand on Black Lives Matters because, consumers are keeping them accountable and they understand that customers are demanding real commitment and change. And it's been interesting to see that, it may be a different dynamic with suppliers. And, there are a lot of, even consumer facing companies that may be incentivized or don't have the resources to dig deep and are fine just, asking the question. Someone says, we're palm oil free. And you're like, okay, great. And then, you kind of wave it in.
Yeah. And, the consumers are wicked smart. They have so much access to information. And, like in the jewelry world, if you're saying that, these emeralds were mined ethically and they were, it's easy to say one thing, but it's pretty quick to find out if that's a real true cause. And, in contemporary jewelry, anything that you're taking out of the earth is going to be doing damage, right? It's going to take labor. It's going to take, it's going to poison water, no matter how ethical you say you're being. And so in sustainability and reusing and upcycling these pieces, then you're giving the chance for the earth to heal a bit. And I think that the consumer is drifting a lot more towards that route, as opposed to like the fast fashion or the buying something off of a rack or a jewelry display case somewhere.
Thank you. Ken, I'm curious about how you're able to be more responsible. For Ken and also Celine, I know that during this time, during this pandemic, it's been challenging for you, Celine. I know that you all have had to lay off half of your staff. You're facing different challenges. So if you both can talk a little bit about how you're managing to still be responsible in running the companies that you are a part of during this pandemic period.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I think that's it's so built within the brand that it doesn't go away because the company itself has shrunk, both in sales and headcount levels. It's still what makes up how we run this business. So we could be a team of 1, we could be a team of 500, and this would still be critical to how it is that we commit to every part of our supply chain, to our community, to our employees. So it's still there. And I think that there is, we've been speaking about how is it that we carry forward as a brand in this anti-racist ideology, which is social, what is social responsibility really? And it starts at so many different levels of the system in which we work. And we have to almost take a step back. So when you think about it as an individual on a community level, the ways in which we operate within a oppressive and racist government, an oppressive and racist economy, financially, politically, on an education level, transportation level, and how is it that we function as a company within that, and then how do we start pinpointing those constructs that we can shift on an individual and company basis. And so, with us, it's about looking at let's start on an employee level. And, we're not a brand that does it perfectly. I don't think there is one white brand out there that does do it perfectly. During this time, it's been a lot of focus on mental health days and a lot of focus on, what would be considered hard discourse around racial justice or social impact or equity, and having those conversations with our company and seeing how we could make these strides forward collectively, which is critical, but also putting the onus on our own employees to take that within on themselves and really move forward in that, and creating an empowerment around that. And I think then, that grows out as well as how do we do that as a company? And it's what I said in the beginning, is around partnerships and collaborations and using our platform to create action, and using our platform to be political when before brands were so shy, including ourselves, being very shy about being political. Will we lose customers? What will they view us as? And there's just no room for that anymore, especially, in 2016, that was our pivotal moment of, F this. It's game time in terms of how we use our platform. And if we lose customers to this by being, what's called socially responsible, but it is actually just truly being human, then so be it. But what we really wanted to do was be able to shift mindsets and use the brand's name, the reach, and the awareness of that to take that kind of action. And I think for us, that's also what social responsibility is. So all of that to say that even though there is a pandemic out there, that there is a crash of an economy that's happening, we still have a platform, we still have a reach, we still have a voice, and we use that power responsibly and in a way that creates empowerment for others as well, especially those who are being so disproportionately disenfranchised. Again, not just in this moment. I have very little tolerance personally in some expressions that are, this is what's happening now, and goodness, look at this world that we live in now. And it's almost a desire to shake individuals and say, hello, welcome. This has been happening, but we won't, especially as a brand, cancel and call out, but rather ask for that accountability that so many brands are now turning around and freaking out and saying, we have to show our social responsibility strategy. We have to show our DEI strategy. Yes. And just please commit to the long term. This is not a Band-Aid solution. And that's something that we hold ourselves accountable to as well. So the work that we had been doing, what more? What more can we do? How much more can we look introspectively at ourselves and know where we're not doing it right, where we can have those uncomfortable conversations, where we can call our biases out when we're feeling defensive about being called out and saying, oof, that's the learning moment. That's social responsibility on a brand level that we really want to ensure is imparted across the industry and for all individuals.
Can I also add too, if what Celine was saying was not part of your brand's DNA, then up until that point, it really wasn't sustainable. It really wasn't responsible. And I think that's something that we have to be very, very transparent about. If that wasn't built into the DNA of your brand, up into this sort of new wave of awareness, your brand wasn't ethical. It wasn't, socially responsible. It wasn't any of that. And I think people need to be very conscious of that. And that is absolutely where, and I have to say that we didn't have that a few years ago. We didn't have that awareness. For us, sustainability was production, manufacturing, fibers, fabrications. And we did have a moment of saying, how can we even speak about sustainability without looking at a greater framework whereby we take into consideration the communities that are most impacted by climate change, by global warming, by all these catastrophes that the apparel industry is absolutely integral in having caused, and use that within our framework of sustainability. And so looking at initiatives like Ngozi has been spearheading forever around Custom Collaborative, like Dominique and Whitney have been doing in marginalized community, and how do we use that and build that within our own company within this framework. And again, there's no end in sight. This is the forever work. And so any white-owned company who's saying, oh, well, I got it right, you didn't. And that's okay. That's okay. You can get it wrong, but you'll never fully get it right. And that is the work.
I completely agree. And so just a couple things. One, I hear you when you say, Alicia, it's time to hit pause, and we are doing that with internal work and rethinking our programmatic work at EWG now in this moment. This also is, doesn't, to me at 68, doesn't feel new. In some fundamental ways, I find myself thinking, where the fuck have you been that you haven't seen some of this going on, that these battles have been raging for a long time. But there is nonetheless a new awakening. I think for us, our primary consumer engagement, in addition to lots of guides we give them to avoid toxic chemicals, it's through the personal care industry, where we have this database called Skin Deep that you may have heard of, that rates personal care products on the hazardous properties of the ingredients, and that has spawned a third-party certification that we've developed called EWG Verified. And in all of that, our focus on equity, and inclusiveness has been becoming smarter and deeper, but we did start with the basic premise that we couldn't be focused on a product category where the healthy offerings were only available to people of means. We couldn't ignore the fact that this was a product category, personal care products generally, cosmetics, shampoos, etc., where, according to the study we did in 2016, the offerings to Black women, there weren't hardly any non-hazardous products being marketed to Black women, and it's not just hair products, but across the board. So to us, what this is about is, and I love what Dominique said, you know, we have to have this broader accountability frame that we're still building. It seems to me we're still trying to understand what it means. What I want, though, is I want to harness the movement of the time. And I think that means to I think what Celine was getting at, the willingness to make mistakes and recognition that you're going to make them and hear about them when you're told about them, to hear them. And what we're also seeing is that the exciting thing about the economy now is that you don't have to shift half of a market to see impacts on the rest of it. A small fraction of the market that gets impacted with a value that's about some dimension of sustainability or multiple dimensions, as many as you can and as fast as you can accumulate them. There's an appetite for that now. There's an understanding of the need for it. And so pioneering brands that start to move in that direction and shake things up can have an outsized influence on a market segment for the better. And to us, that's a very exciting prospect at a time when policy is pretty frozen and it's hard to make change happen that way. Consumers can make it happen.
Thank you, Ken, Celine, and Dominique. There was a question from David in the comments. Can brands make a pivot to be more sustainable without having been so in the past? Can they do that and also be authentic? And Dominique said, any person, community, or business structure model can always become more sustainable, always. I think that's an important point. I'm going to turn it over sorry, go ahead.
Just wanted to jump in, and David, sorry I kept my answer short, but because it does deserve a much longer answer to that. And though we don't do it right all the time, Mara Hoffman shifted towards more sustainable practices and became much more aware 15 years into the business. And this is our 20th year now. And so that's why I say that it's never too late. And I was also going to say that any company or corporation, whatever size you are, whatever size, SMEs up to the Fortune 500s can do this. And, you know, throw the concept of profit out the door when it comes to this. It's not capitalist nuance that is going to help drive these variables forward. And rest assured, you can still remain profitable while implementing this differentiator framework that really helps move this needle forward.
Thank you, Celine. So Ngozi, can you talk a little bit about the work you've pivoted to since COVID and the opportunities that you've been able to provide for low-income women during the pandemic? I know you mentioned earlier that you all have pivoted to making PPE. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe some of the challenges and triumphs that you've experienced over the last, I think it's been like 2-3 months now of this pandemic?
3 months, 30 months.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks so much for asking, Tabitha. So Custom Collaborative exists to provide economic opportunity for low-income and immigrant women, basically women from Black and Brown communities. And given basically the work that they were doing with Custom Collaborative and other places, their work was cut off, right? When we all had to shelter in place, that meant if you worked at a restaurant, if you were working, in a hat shop, wherever you worked, you weren't going to be working there anymore. And so we didn't know how we would do it, but we knew that we needed to make sure that we were providing opportunity, right? That we were being consistent with the reason for our being. And so we, been in conversations with the local government about making gowns. And then when that fell through, immediately we said, okay, we talked about masks, so we're going to make masks. And so that's what we did. We hired the women, our makers, to make masks. We had no idea who was going to buy these masks or how we were going to market them. We had actually had a pop-up planned for the middle of March. And so really that's how we sell things. I think in the prior 2 years, we had sold 3 items on our website. So we were kind of direct to consumer, but really more in theory. And so we had to train women how to make masks. We had to get fabric to make masks. We had to figure out how to do this all remotely. And in a matter of a couple of weeks, we did. Of course, we had some hiccups, but we figured it out. And so we've recently started a campaign, Who Made My PPE? And some of the people on this who I see in front of me are again, influencers and activists and supporting us in that work. But it's important to do that because there are masks out there that people are selling for $5, right? And so there's no way that you can sell a mask for $5 that is ethical. Besides the fact, the fabric may not be great. But also then whoever made it was not being paid a fair wage. And so at Custom Collaborative, we have negotiated with our makers about the price that we're going to pay. We originally had one price and some of them said, well, I think it should be this price. And so it's a back and forth, as I think it should be in a real company, right? If you have a business that relies on people, then people should have some say in what's going on. And so one of our makers recently said, I don't want to make any more tie masks. So these are the masks that, have ties on them. I want to make elastic masks because I'm so tired of it. And so we had to figure out, okay, well, let's find some elastic masks for her. We wanted her to do the tie masks because they're harder and she's an excellent maker. But we also need to be responsive to what people want and what people need. And we're not here to force people to do anything. Women are in our programs from over 20 different countries. And some people are here because they're refugees from conflict and all types of other things. And so the last thing that we want to do is to be oppressive. And that's not who we are as an organization. And so at Custom Collaborative, sustainability has always relied on the at least 2 pillars of environmental sustainability and care, as well as care for the people who make our clothes, who make us look good, who help us express ourselves. So Celine did not talk about it, but I will say that in addition to Mara Hoffman using its platform, Mara Hoffman has also helped us because everything we make is from fabrics that are diverted from waste stream. They're donated. And so Mara's team, found a way to get us a lot of fabric. So we're actually then also making these masks and selling them on our website. Again, I said that nobody ever came to our website before. And, when we did the Instagram Live with Mara, all of a sudden we had these hundreds of orders. So it's so important for people to be able to share their influence, share the mic, and listen to and collaborate with others. So that's what I want to say about our PPE. But again, it's so important that we've got this campaign, Who Made My PPE? Because people need to know this thing does not cost $1 to make. It doesn't cost $5 to make. And so there's no way you can buy it for $7 and feel good if you really think about who was exploited in order for it to get here.
And Ngozi, just for folks to know who are listening in, what is a fair price when folks are looking at the things they should look for in a mask to buy? Can you just point us in the right direction? What are some markers that folks should be looking for in terms of price, fabrication, and so forth?
Right. So I will say that, our masks, the Mara Hoffman custom collaboration, those masks are $28. That's less expensive than some of the designer masks that I've seen, but we're not really in this to make a huge profit. Custom Collaborative is a nonprofit social enterprise. To be clear, we want money. You know, we're looking right now for money for a big bet because we need to expand and grow the work that we do because there's such demand. So we're fair. We want to remain, you know, in some ways accessible. And so again, the price point is something that the Mara Hoffman team and the Custom Collaborative team came up with together. This is our standard mask. It's made of shirting. Most of our masks are like very fine Italian cotton men's shirting. Those are $25 for a tie mask and $20 for an elastic mask. So I think that our prices are reasonable. I know what goes into it. I know what people get. I know that you can, you know, wash and wear this thing dozens of times. So I can just, you know, connect it to what the price point is, what we're charging. And then people can go on our website and see the other options. Our standard reusable mask, it's a green one. We change it every week. And then we also have what we're calling a unity mask, which I think is really important right now. And it's African print. And it's really unity because I think that in order for all of us to reach liberation, we have to work at it together. It's really hard work. Thank you, Dominique, for showing that. Beautiful. That's one of the African prints, the unity mask. And it's just like a couple of other people said, it's ongoing work. Like we strive to be an anti-racist organization and we do work around it constantly.
And also to add into that the reason for that price point too is that fabric is a Tencel fabric. So it's a sustainably sourced fabric. So, you know, there is a premium that goes into the actual, you know, what it is that you're actually putting on your face, which is of critical importance too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People have remarked that our masks are comfortable. And this is a Tencel linen, Tencel cotton. And again, I mentioned the others are shirting.
Thank you both. So we are starting to wrap up. I'm going to ask Dominique a question. And then if folks want to chime in about calls to action, where do people go from here? What's the next step? So Dominique, what specific community efforts are you working on right now? And can you share any calls to action? Feel free, y'all, if you want to shout out where folks can donate to, your website and so forth. This is a moment where you can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tabitha. Definitely follow Sustainable Brooklyn. Our Instagram handle is Sustainable BK. Some of the initiatives that we're working on is a 3-part series called WTFs, standing for What the Fuck. The first part was fashion. We just recently had agriculture, and then we'll have wellness coming up, and really just bringing people in our community to the forefront of conversation to discuss community and systems and what regenerative circularity can look like and needs to look like, and just sharing resources with our rich community. We're working with a small collective to sort of mitigate the food epidemic. So focusing on food justice and food insecurity, we're working with a Black farmer by the name of Amber Tam. And you can find her on Instagram. That's Amber Tam with 2 M's. She actually has a GoFundMe on her page right now because she's working to transform part of Central Park into a fully accessible farm and giving people free food. And she's working to have it fully sponsored. And for those that don't know, it used to be Seneca Village. There's a historical component. It was once a thriving Black community in Central Park, and white racism wiped that out. So there's an important historical context to the work that we're doing in addition to working with Amber. We just recently had a rent relief fund. What Whitney and I are really big about doing with Sustainable Brooklyn is assessing the needs of the community, and rent was one of those things. So we do have a rent relief option on our website, to help us help our community to pay rent to folks who are struggling right now, whether it's because of the pandemic or whether folks are on the front lines fighting, colonial infrastructure during the protests. And then we're also working on the back end, we're working on curating a town hall focused on Black safety right now. So we're still in the very beginning stages of that, but trying to create an internal community network while also infusing what potential allyship might look like for Black safety. And yeah, again, find us on Sustainable Brooklyn. We're working on a lot of different efforts, and we are always open to hearing comments, concerns, questions, and ideas for transformative collaboration.
Thank you, Dom. Anyone else have calls to action that you want to share right now?
Yeah, I hear from a lot of people that it can be kind of paralyzing to take action because you're not sure, like, how are you supposed to solve everything you want to solve? And a very good friend of mine told me, focus on something that means a lot to you and put your energy into that and make change. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And one of my favorite accounts is called Badass Mother Birther. And she has an initiative called Birth a Black Midwife. And so only 2% of the women in the birthing community are Black or women of color. And so she is aiming to change that. And so she's got a great way where you can donate and you can then pay for the tuition for a woman of color to become a midwife. And what this does is not only enriches the community, but saves hundreds and hundreds of lives and protects these women and babies. So that's my favorite initiative right now.
Thank you so much. I think we're at 5:00. We have time for maybe one more before we wrap up.
Ngozi, do it.
That was for you, Ngozi.
She's my boss. So I would say I've heard a lot of people talking about, like, how can we solve this problem? And I want to say to white people, you don't even understand the problem, right? So the first thing to do is go and educate yourself. I know that this book, from what I understand, is sold out, How to Be an Anti-Racist. There's a book, Me and White Supremacy. So you can't fix it if you don't understand it. What you can do is support Black and brown businesses, right? So try as much as possible to find and locate Black and brown businesses. Give money to Black and brown causes because its people have already been doing the work on a shoestring. And commit to hiring and bringing into your workforces Black people, brown people, because we have so much brain power and ingenuity that we use trying to remain safe and alive. You would be really surprised at the things that we can think of because we've developed all these neural pathways. And I guess the only thing I would say for everybody, Black, white, Latinx, Asian, whatever, to do a monthly check-in. So if you're committed to doing work around racial justice and environmental justice, mark on your calendar every month so you can check in with yourself. What have you done? What do you want to do? Because I will be so disappointed if, by the time October comes around, everybody has forgotten about what we're so excited about today.
I just want to dovetail on that to say, the importance of doing, as a white woman, the importance of doing the work and not asking anyone else to do it for me. And I am doing the workbook of Me and White Supremacy right now, and finding other people to do it with. Find the person who wouldn't do it unless you make them accountable, and be accountable to each other. Having accountability partnership is everything. And as you just said, it's I've always said this about supporting other women, which is hire, mentor, invest. Hire means exactly what it means. If you can't hire, invest. And what invest means is not I'm going to give you $10,000. It means when you're buying wine, look for the person of color and buy their wine. When you're buying wine, look for the woman and buy her wine. And then mentorship is everything. Find the people of color who you're as a white woman, I'm like, well, they don't want my advice. It's really uncomfortable, but I want to offer, and they can say no. You know, I can say, how can I help uplift someone? And that's a big piece of it.
Can I also add, in alignment with what you said, Alicia, and Ngozi, that would be to look at case studies of white-owned and operated brands who have taken the necessary baby steps to transform themselves, i.e., of course, Mara Hoffman and their whole squad have been pivotal, and have done not only work on the forefront, but also in the background. They've done so much behind closed doors while not looking for, you know, applause and pats on the back. And so I have to shout out Mara Hoffman and their squad. They've created space for us both physically and mentally and spiritually to be able to do the work that we're doing, and their level of authenticity comes through like fucking butterflies. I don't even know if that's a analogy, but it's great. So finding case studies, especially if you're a white, you know, space entity, is super important as well.
Thank you so much, Dom. I think that's a good place for us to end. I just want to say my heart is overflowing with gratitude for all of the panelists that have joined us today. Thank you for coming and giving your knowledge and your time, particularly the Black women who have taken the time to educate. Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. Just also want to shout out, thanks so much for our tech team, Bobby, David, Jackie, and the team at Style 360. That's it. It's 5:07. Hope everybody enjoys the rest of your Juneteenth weekend.
Thank you, Terry.
Business.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy first day of summer. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.